In 2048, our planet is overpopulated and has lost access to nearly all natural resources. The government begins a program to genetically engineer 14 soldiers to fly to Saturn's moon Titan and start a new civilization there. These 14 of her volunteers and their families will be relocated to their respective communities and provided with technologically advanced luxury housing. Former pilot Rick is one of those volunteers, along with his wife, Abigail, who is a doctor, and their child, Lucas. Dr. Collingwood, the head of the program, has high hopes for Rick's development. Because when he was in the Air Force, being shot down, wounded and having to cross the Syrian desert alone for 3 days without food or water proved Rick's health. Those who are tough survive. Both Rick and Abigail do this because they want their son to have a future, but Abigail admits to Collingwood that she's a little scared that Rick will get seriously ill. Collingwood admits that things like this can happen, but don't worry, all Rick needs is proper aftercare. Once all volunteers have been moved, they will meet with Collingwood for the first time to begin treatment. First he gave a presentation on the program, how we destroyed the planet, and where to go next because Titan is the only place in the solar system with an atmosphere and a pristine ecosystem. As appropriate. But liquid methane rains down on vast oceans and lakes, making it impossible to swim and breathe the nitrogen-rich atmosphere. It's too cold to live. For this reason, instead of terraforming, they decided to genetically modify humans to match Titan's natural traits. One of the volunteers couldn't understand why the bodies wouldn't refuse treatment, and Collingwood said the trial was a success, but admitted there was no guarantee that everyone would survive. The volunteer continues to question the program, but Rick shuts him up, telling him if he doesn't like it, leave. Volunteers came from all over the world and were chosen because they survived extreme conditions. Once the meeting is over, you will be handed a keycard granting full access to the base and taken to the lab for the first of 300 recordings of her to be received in the coming weeks. Dr. Freya tries to explain the purpose of each shot, but Rick only understands half of it. From there, a new normal begins for Rick's family, but it's anything but normal. Lucas goes to school, Abigail does housework, and accompanies Rick to various treatments if permitted. All the volunteers quickly become friends and spend time together outside the base. Because it is a neighborhood, you can hold dinner parties and barbecues at any time. Sometimes conversations at parties get a little somber, like one of the volunteers confessing that he's worried he won't be able to come back after the 2 years he agreed on Titan. One day, as this was the last time the volunteers were allowed to drink, additional drinking was held at the soup kitchen. In the evening, Abigail gets dizzy from drinking, so Rick helps her upstairs. But she coughed violently, and it was he who fell as she couldn't breathe. Abigail checks on him and finds he has a fever. She immediately dragged him to her bedroom, drugged him, put him to bed, and accompanied him through the night. After some time, Collingwood was very pleased with the volunteer's progress with her DNA sample. This means it's time for massive testing. The group is asked to spend an extended period of time underwater without an oxygen tank, leaving only Rick and Tally after 30 minutes, leading to a bit of competition. In the end, Tally made it to the 39th minute, but Rick managed to stay calm. In fact, he was so comfortable that he started swimming in the pool. This shocked everyone because Rick swims at high speed like a dolphin instead of swimming like a normal human. In the evening, Rick shows his son this new move in the garden pool. He then shoves Lucas inside and the boy surprises Lucas by bringing up about his dead grandfather. He then swims in the pool with his wife, but Abigail stops after noticing black veins on Rick's body. Rick wonders what's going on, but suddenly the darkness disappears and Abigail decides to ignore it for now. A few days later, volunteers undergo their first surgery. One of the women, named Lion, visited Abigail to get her children to play together and shared some of her concerns. She's terrified and she admits that she doesn't think her husband should be here. There Abigail comforts her with the reminder that volunteers will save humanity and most importantly her children. Rick leaves the practice in good health and returns home to continue spending time with his family. Abigail is pleased that he is doing well, but is also concerned about his possible side effects. The side effects were described in the instructions given to them. Later that night, Abigail wakes up to find his bed empty. It turns out that Rick is so hot that he puts ice on his skin in the kitchen. Abigail prepares a big bucket of cold water and Rick challenges her to a little game. They both put their hands in the bucket. Abigail couldn't stand the cold and had to take them out after a few minutes, but Rick put his hands there to make sure he wasn't feeling the cold anymore. The next morning, they go for a run together, stopping to look at the most scenic and special spots in the area on the road. Rick laments that he can't save the Earth. Various experiments are ongoing, such as running in a mask that mimics Titan's atmosphere and swimming in freezing water for long periods of time. Sometimes volunteers can't stand it and have to go out for a day, but Tully is stubborn and wants to stay in the water, even though she can't stand the cold. To help her, Rick teaches her to meditate underwater. One afternoon after the test, while the volunteers were taking a shower, Rick noticed that her hair was falling out. Tully admits it happened to her too. Suddenly I heard screams and realized that one of the women had a seizure and was vomiting blood. Her doctors rushed to help her, but she was unable to save her, and the volunteers encountered the first death in the group. Later in the day the volunteers meet to discuss what happened. Some of them are afraid to die, while others remind them that they always knew the risks. They shouldn't be drinking, but decided to drink anyway to cope. Tally's husband Andrew helps Abigail in the kitchen while Lyanne comforts her husband Zane outside her. He tells how they met and how they fought to the end to be married to Tully, after which Tully joins them, pointing out that Andrew now longs to start a family. Increase. As Andrew walks off to put the plate on the table, Tully thinks Andrew is going to leave for 2 years to get out of his system and be a good wife, but she wants more than that. I confess volunteer veins can sometimes turn black. Suddenly, a scream is heard from the garden. Zane becomes unwell and attacks Reen. The other boys quickly rush outside and hold Zane until he calms down while Abigail takes Lyanne away. The next day, Freya comes to the neighborhood to give the volunteers extra medicine to keep them from having the same problems as the dead woman and Zane. Abigail realizes some of these doses are very high and asks to speak to Collingwood, but he is unreachable. Later that night, Rick vomited blood. Abigail tells him to rest while he cleans up, and he takes a blood sample from Rick when he's not looking. Then, when she goes through her house and locks all the doors, she finally discovers that there are hidden cameras inside her house that allow the show's cast to monitor her 24/7. I noticed. She noticed that the next time Rick used the pool, her skin was peeling off, but she doesn't seem too concerned. At bedtime, Abigail notices Rick's skin condition and hair falling out, further increasing her concern. She finds that the next day, Abigail examines Rick's blood under a microscope and finds it to be black. After some time, the volunteers perform the next major procedure. It's about making your eyes look like cat eyes so you can see in the dark. The surgery is going well, but Rick has to be blindfolded for a while and her family has to help around the house. One night, Abigail hears Rick moaning in pain with blood streaming from her eyes. They take him to the lab for another operation, and Abigail approaches Collingwood to ask what's going on. She points out that something is alive inside Rick and knows about cameras. Collingwood didn't want the camera, she explained, but it was a security order from the Department of Defense and Collingwood's blindness was part of the process and she would be fine within a few days. She suspects Abigail is hiding more, but Collingwood lets her go home. Abigail goes to her house and starts getting her clothes ready for Rick, but suddenly she hears a siren. She goes outside and finds the army surrounding Zane's house. She was not allowed any closer, but still witnessed the terrifying sight that followed. The mutant Zane threw Rayanne out of her window, killing her instantly. Soldiers broke into the house and shot Zane, killing him as well. Later, at the base, Abigail watches Rick and hears more soldiers arriving. Collingwood will be busy dealing with this mess, so Abigail uses the opportunity to steal Rick's keycard and take a peek. After hiding in a strategic location to evade security, she enters Collingwood's office and transforms animal DNA into volunteer DNA in order to achieve the next evolutionary stage, the Collingwood Homo Titanian. Find all files that show that the is injected. Meanwhile, Collingwood meets with Colonel Solano and NASA people who call it unproven science and call for the program to be shut down. Volunteers get violent and it's not a matter of space, it's stepping into the realm of crime. The Nazis were the last to attempt something like this. Colonel Solano wants the test off the base, but Collingwood and his advisors point out that the final decision rests with the Secretary of Defense and won't go unless they say so. After the meeting, Freya also tried to tell Collingwood to stop, but Collingwood fired her. After Rick is sent home, Collingwood arrives and tells him that she will see him again in 24 hours. They had misjudged the brain's ability to process enhanced senses, and Zane's mind was simply overwhelmed, but new surgery could improve the situation. Abigail finally became enraged and demanded to know the truth, after which Collingwood eventually admitted to injecting the volunteers with animal DNA. He understands Abigail's concerns because he can't guarantee that it will work, but he also points out that there was always a risk. Rick must undergo this new procedure to survive. Abigail hates hearing this and remains silent for a while. A day later, Rick removes his bandages and confirms that his vision is fine. He also shaves his head to avoid baldness. As night fell, he was so impressed that he could see details in the dark and called Collingwood to see if he would perform the operation. All volunteers undergo surgery while their families are at home, but many complications occur and most die. In the end, only Rick and Tally survive. The next day, Andrew, Abigail, and Lucas visit Rick and Tally, but are shocked to discover that they have become some kind of mutant creature, communicating only through tactile contact and low frequencies that humans cannot hear. Abigail cries as Rick puts his hand on the glass separating them, and her tears get even worse when Collingwood hands her Rick's wedding ring. In a few days, Tully and Rick are due to leave for Titan, but in the meantime they are allowed to stay home. Rick has difficulty wearing human clothes, and when Abigail tries to help him, Rick accidentally hits her. He tries to check on her, but Abigail is so afraid of him that she can't help but resist his touch. Rick spends most of his time in the pool and he feels he is more comfortable there than at home. One night, after putting Lucas to bed, Abigail looks out and sees Tully walking into the garden with her bloodied hands. Rick doesn't seem to care and approaches Tally so he can communicate by a strange tentacle sticking out of Tally's fingers. At that moment, The military arrived in the neighborhood and found Andrew dead in the shower. They also approached Abigail's house, prompting her to run upstairs to hide with Lucas. Her soldiers shoot Tally with tranquilizer arrows, but it takes quite a few guns to bring her down. However, as they approach, Tully reveals her awakening and uses her tentacles to kill one of them. Others immediately react and open fire, killing them. The soldiers then try to chase Rick, but he easily knocks them out with his newfound strength. Rick tries to drown the last soldier in the pool, but Abigail hears the commotion and comes out to stop him. Unfortunately, it's too late and Rick realizes what he's done and runs away. Colonel Solano calls the entire team to find Rick. He ignores Collingwood's pleas not to kill him because his research costs money. Abigail and Lucas are taken to the base for safety, but Abigail realizes where Rick has gone and leaves. After confirming that Abigail is not being followed, he runs to a special location, where he finds Rick. Abigail holds out her hand to prove she's no longer afraid, and she kisses Rick as her tentacles grab her wrist. At that moment they were spotted by a military helicopter and smashed. Abigail later wakes up at the base with Collingwood on her side, explaining that she had to hurt her for their own good. The Department of Defense plans to shut down the program soon. That means Rick must be sent to Titan immediately, as Tully has proven that the Earth's atmosphere will either drive them crazy or simply kill these new bodies. But they can't force it on Rick either. Abigail has to convince Rick to leave because doing so may kill him too. She is then taken to Rick, who is locked in a glass cage. Collingwood tells Abigail to give Rick an injection of quishapine, which acts like a chemical lobotomy and erases all his memories. Abigail doesn't like it, but Collingwood explains it's the only way to get him to leave. A soldier hands her a quishapine injection from a drawer, which Abigail drops to pick it up. Abigail then enters the cage and she exchanges meaningful glances with Rick before she gives him an injection that knocks her unconscious. When Abigail comes out, she asks Freya to come with her while the soldiers approach Rick to prepare for the trip. However, Rick pretends to knock her unconscious and kills the man. Collingwood notices Abigail taking saline out of a drawer and giving it to Rick when the soldiers aren't looking. The soldiers open fire, but Rick simply escapes and hides in a dark room that favors vision. Abigail picks up Lucas, and Freya leads them to another exit, where they find a badly injured Rick. Lucas and Abigail hug him to prove once again that they are not afraid, and Freya searches for medicine, but suddenly all the soldiers show up. Collingwood asks the women to flee or the soldiers will shoot them all, but Abigail refuses. Enraged, Collingwood begs the soldiers to open fire, but Solano confronts him and tells him that he will not shoot two unarmed women and an innocent child. He then pointed his gun at Collingwood and all the other soldiers followed suit. After Collingwood's arrest, Abigail rushed to Rick's embrace, and her hugs allowed Rick to reinforce his most cherished memories. Sometime later, Abigail and Freya become researchers on the Titan II project, using more ethical methods to save the world. Meanwhile, Rick is sent to Titan, where he reveals that his new body has wings, allowing him to fly around his new home. In a world on the brink of collapse, the daring mission to Titan becomes a symbol of hope and resilience. As Rick and Tally's family face uncertainties, sacrifices, and extraordinary changes, they embrace their new destinies, pushing the boundaries of humanity in their pursuit of a better future. With the Earth's fate in their hands, the volunteers stand united, ready to embark on an epic journey to a distant moon, where they will pave the way for a new civilization and ultimately find the courage to explore the unknown and redefine what it means to be human.